You're listening to Randall's Thoughts on HBCU Pulse Radio.
Yes, so on today's Randall's Thoughts, I want to talk about this viral tweet that I put out that elicited a lot of interesting responses. So I had a tweet that went viral on Monday about Vice President Kamala Harris and her outreach to Black media organizations during her presidential campaign. Now, like I said, it's safe to say that I drew a lot of interesting reactions that I didn't expect that went a little bit over the line, and my block and mute game had to be really strong, but I felt as if we had to have a conversation about her outreach to Black voters via Black media outlets. To date, she's made several appearances on Black-owned and Black-targeted media outlets, as she's conducted interviews with Roland Martin, Shannon Sharp, The Shade Room, and even Charlemagne the God in a special audio town hall that aired live on multiple iHeart radio stations around the nation. And as of this recording, The Breakfast Club aired a taped phone interview with Vice President Kamala Harris specifically for their morning show, where she went into immense detail about her policy platforms. Everything that the vice president has done in this campaign has been nearly letter perfect. I don't care what anybody says. And I believe that the strategic elements of the Harris-Walz campaign is going to redefine how elections are approached in the future. But beyond just the savvy campaign strategy, I believe that Vice President Harris has the potential to reshape the political landscape if she is elected as the 47th president of the United States. Now, I already know what some folks are thinking. If she were to win the presidency, I mean, that is what we should expect for her to do, right? And I get it, but it's not that simple to me. I go back to my viral tweet and the range of opinions that it garnered from me simply pointing out that Vice President Kamala Harris has been on several Black media outlets during her campaign. And if y'all don't believe me, I encourage you all to go to @AuthorRandallB on X, formerly known as Twitter, to take a look, because all I did was mention a few of the Black media outlets and hosts that she's spoken to up to this point, and people immediately said that I had a low bar for my expectations of her as a candidate, and that she went on those outlets specifically to quote unquote pander to Black voters. Now, it made me think, because I think the root of a lot of the political discontent that we see in this nation, especially in our community, is a level of distrust in politicians and government institutions at the local, federal, and state level. If you think a candidate going on a platform to reach a specific group of voters is quote unquote pandering instead of a smart campaign move to further push your specific policy agenda, I can assume that you're someone who has a general mistrust of politics and politicians. And I don't think it's necessarily erroneous. A distrust of the political system is still ingrained in our community due to what we historically have had to go through in this country. You even have presidents who have derided the efficacy of the government's ability to help the American people. And here's the thing. I'm not talking about the person you think I'm talking about. In a press conference in 1986, then President Ronald Reagan said, quote, "I think you all know that I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Now I resent that statement and sentiments like it, which creeps often into our political discourse every day. Government and policy can help us solve the problems that face our society. Just look at history. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Affordable Care Act passed under Barack Obama. Even the establishment of the designation of HBCUs is due to the protections of the Higher Education Act of 1965. And if you had a Pell Grant, a federal student loan, or was a part of a work-study program at any point in time in your college career, whether it's undergrad or postgrad, you can thank the federal government. So you can't tell me that government can't work in the interest of the people, but people lose trust in the government process because it operates slowly on partisan lines. And because of that, there's a distrust of politicians and specifically their policy agendas. But here's the thing. I think that Kamala Harris can change the distrust of politics, politicians, and government and create a new way to advocate for the nation. Her presidency could redefine public policy with its laser-focused emphasis on addressing specific subsets of Americans so they can be heard. The Harris-Walz campaign went out of their way to make sure that Black men have specific policy plans after Democratic politicians have long been criticized for taking the Black male vote for granted. She's speaking to other often marginalized groups in contrast to what her opponent and his team has been doing on the campaign trail. But in my opinion, that's why representation matters to the highest levels. I believe the reason why Vice President Kamala Harris can speak robustly about the issues affecting the American people is because of her varied experiences. Have you heard her speak? She often talks about growing up in a middle-class single-parent household. She often talks about how the formative years of her HBCU experience and how it grew her into the leader that she is today. She often invokes the work that she did as a federal prosecutor, district attorney, attorney general, senator, and as the vice president to inform her viewpoint and the stances that she's taking in this campaign. Having that mindset and that mentality in her governance is going to help Vice President Harris fight for the goodwill of the people. And I think that within itself will be radical and revolutionary to the political landscape. She can shift the way that people view politics by her actions. Imagine her presenting this robust policy agenda about cutting costs for Americans and the costs go down. Imagine the further expansion of the Affordable Care Act. Imagine the advancing of legislation to alleviate the burden of student loan debt that she was signed when it hits her desk. I believe the Kamala Harris presidency can not only give us hope, it can give people trust that politics and government can finally work for them. And in these moments, I think that can help heal the nation and move us forward. Now, I can't tell you what's going to happen on Election Day on November 5th. I wish I had a crystal ball or psychic powers like I'm on That's So Raven to see into the future, because it would make me less anxious about what's to come. But I just believe that there's a clear path forward and that Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States could shape the perception of politics and government for a generation. Those are my thoughts on today.
Like what you hear?
Yeah.
Subscribe to HBCU Pulse Radio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, head to hbcupulse.com to stay up to date on what's going on in the HBCU community. Thank you for listening to HBCU Pulse Radio.